Hello and welcome to another exclusive episode on the Express Tribune podcast. My name is Iram Sheikh, and in today's episode, we have the privilege of hosting a diplomat, a global leader, and an adventurer at heart. Miss Leslie Scanlon has been Canada's High Commissioner to Pakistan since 2022, bringing with her decades of experience in international trade, diplomacy, and crisis leadership. From Japan to France, from Harvard to Carleton, her career has taken her across the world. And when she's not shaping global affairs, you might just find her canoeing, hiking, or enjoying a new cuisine, these days in Pakistan. Let's dive in as we find out more about her fascinating journey, what it means to represent Canada on the world stage and here in Pakistan. Welcome to our podcast, Your Excellency.
Thank you. That was an amazing intro.
Oh,
Thank you. Wow, I'm thinking that sounds like a neat person.
Yeah, well, hi. We have you on board for that particular reason. We find you as neat as you believe you are. So, can you tell us, you've been here 2 years now, or a little over 2 years, in fact. What was it like the first 2 weeks that you had, arrived in Pakistan, and now over 2 years in, how do you feel about it? What experiences, have things changed for you? What's the experience been like?
Having never been to Pakistan, when I arrived, it was the usual arrival time of like 1:30 in the morning or whatever.
Right.
And you get out of the airport, you're driving into the city, it's like 4:30 in the morning or something. And it was at a time when a certain former prime minister had been talking about a march on Islamabad,
Right.
so there were containers everywhere. And it felt a little like Heart of Darkness, because it was the coagulated iron containers,
right.
and you're driving in and the sun is not quite up yet. And then I get to the Canadian official residence, and there are two mosques either corner, so you get two different calls to prayer that are never quite synchronized in
Right.
time. So as the sun comes up, you're in this new place, and you hear the call to prayer, and it felt romantic, it felt historic. I must say it was really almost mystical to arrive in that environment, because it was, you come in the middle of the night and you're driving through a city that's just waking up, but the containers really. And since then, I must say that a lot of what I tweet about, though I tweet a lot less now because it's so difficult to actually tweet. But when I first got here, I tweeted a lot about the traveling we were doing, the food we were eating, the diversity of the country. And I think that over the time I've been here, I've profoundly changed my feeling about this country that I knew nothing about, because security is one part of Pakistan, the challenges here. And that's the biggest part I think a lot of people who don't know Pakistan might think of. But when you come here, it's just such a small part of your life here, because it's just such a great country full of so many interesting people and interesting places to travel. And of course, the politics are dynamic and always interesting.
Yes.
So I guess over the time I've been here, what I've learned is this is a very diverse and interesting, fascinating country. So it's been a really great adventure.
Thank you for saying that,
Yeah.
and absolutely, I hope our viewers are listening in, and those abroad, find this as an opportunity to actually come and visit. You have a very demanding career. How do you balance things? What's a day in the life of the High Commissioner look like, and what does a break look like? How do you unwind?
How to unwind. It's difficult to unwind in this country because of the security frame that I am subject to.
Right.
So I always have to have security wherever I go, which means it's very hard, even if I go for a hike, I have to have security. So that makes it less personal in some ways. But it's meeting the people I get to meet is just, my days are full. Obviously in Pakistan, a lot of your engagement takes place in the evening over meals.
Right.
And so you get to know people in a more relaxed environment. You get to taste their food. You're in their homes, or maybe you go to a restaurant. But that kind of time together is really good. My job here is to represent Canadian interests, obviously, and working with my like-minded partners on issues that are important to us all, like human rights, like media freedom, like all kinds of issues to be very aware of. But we also are here as a development partner, so we have an interest in making sure that Pakistan has what it needs, what it is identifying as its needs to develop, and so that's an important part of the work that we do. A lot of our travel is centered around the development work that we do in this country, but I think a lot of it is image building, and but it's an interesting question about downtime, because when you're head of mission, when you're an ambassador, a high commissioner, you're never off. You're never off duty in the country you're serving in.
Right.
But I am here with no children. Both of my kids are now grown up, but they both spent a lot of time in Pakistan with me in Islamabad. But when I first went as ambassador to Poland, I had a son who was autistic, and I found that was challenging. I think as women, we do it all. I think women do. We do everything. And I thought, wow, I look back on it, I think, how did I, as a mother, single mother with an autistic child, going back and forth to school, but also being an ambassador. And I think a lot of women have that reality in our lives. But in Pakistan, it's been a little more straightforward because I haven't had my children with me. So as much like full-time taking care of them. They're older now, so it's not the same. But
no, absolutely, I understand that completely. In fact, I also have an autistic
Do
nephew.
you?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And he's brought new light to our lives, I believe.
It's like a learning thing, isn't it? Like autism,
is.
I don't know if you knew anything about autism. I certainly knew nothing about it.
Absolutely.
And every day you're like, oh, that's why he hated going cycling, with grass.
That's new, I didn't realize.
You felt like you were going, well, that's ridiculous, get over yourself. And now you're like, oh my goodness, I was a terrible
I'm so
mother.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So what did your kids think of Pakistan when they...
Oh, they loved it. They both... We were doing these women's empowerment through sport activities up north, and both of my children came. So you asked about my first 2 weeks here. I landed on the 22nd of November. January 1st, my children and I were in a convoy, like a police escort convoy, driving up to Chitral. And we went into Buni and then into Parawak, into little communities, and we're teaching ice hockey. And it was the coldest I have ever been. But my children are both ice hockey players. My daughter was a very good high-level competitive hockey player. And we brought a staff from the embassy, we brought equipment, we brought skates and hockey sticks, and we were working to empower girls to be confident through sport. And working with local communities who wanted us to be there. We're not there to tell people how to live, but people invited us in. So that was quite a change from landing in Islamabad and ending up in the up in the northwest of Pakistan. Pretty fantastic introduction.
I'm sorry, but I'm very curious to ask, was it colder than it is in Canada?
Well, I think what was different was the buildings aren't heated. And the walls were very thin. And so both my son and daughter and I got in bed with me, and we put every blanket we could find on top of us, because you can't leave the gas running overnight. And things like, to use the washroom, you have to have a bucket of water. Well, the bucket of water was a big bucket of ice. It was a solid chunk of ice. So we're like, oh, what are we going to do about that? So my daughter got out her skates and chipped away at the ice to make it like little pieces of ice to melt it. It's like we're kind of going, but we were so cold. We were warm outside in the sun all day, but at night it was very cold. Right.
Yeah,
that's why.
A new camping experience. All right. So, I mean, since we've been talking about, women and the different things that they have to juggle, whether it is work life or personal life, and generally what other things life is likely to throw at you. International Women's Day is also just around the corner. And I'm wondering if you could just reflect on some of the challenges and successes that you've had in implementing programs about addressing gender-based violence and child and early forced marriages in Pakistan. Are those initiatives meeting their objectives, and what measurable impact have they had on local communities?
I'm not sure how much direct work we've done on early forced marriage. We deal with that in the consular context, where there's a Canadian who does get, a lot of Canadian girls might come back with their families and get caught up in that. But we haven't, as a programming issue, done a lot in that area. A lot of the work we do with women is in building political engagement and trying to encourage women to participate in politics. We want to empower women to work, to have their businesses. We want to empower women with men to reduce their family sizes, 2 children, not 8 children, and space your children so that you'll be healthy and your children will be healthy and you can afford to have children. And some of the good programs that I thought were just mind-boggling were programs like Kasha Foundation in Lahore, where they have a how to be a good mother-in-law class. I mean, really. And I'm just like, what is that? And I talked to one of the women graduating from the class and asked her, what does it mean to be a good mother-in-law? Or women who are being given financial literacy on their flip phone. And they want to have a business making wedding makeup or whatever. And they can have they can do their own business once they've had training on that. So, or up north in Chitral, you're funding centers where girls can go and have ICT skills, and then they can work for Amazon but stay in their local community. So the community gets an IT hub, and we support them with connectivity, and then the village might hire a security guard so that there's 24/7 security, so the young woman can go in at 2 in the morning if that's the time difference where they need to work with clients who are in another time zone. So I can just go on and on about women's empowerment. Like, I went to the Kalash Valley a few months ago, and the Kalash had a hard time maintaining a very high level of healthy live birth because they birth in the village, and if they had any delivery challenges. So we trained a midwife, and I met her, and she was fully dressed in her gorgeous Kalash. I don't know how they get around. Like, it's just right. It's not even pinned on your head. Like, I was wearing one around going, I don't know. But she showed me her ledger where she has now delivered 6 healthy babies. And the pride of this woman, I can't describe. And meaningful changes like that, it may appear like a drop in a bucket, but it's changed everything for that community. Or there's we work with all kinds of agencies in Pakistan, like the Aga Khan Rural Support Network. Yeah. So in one area up north, there was a program talking about passive solar greenhouses. So this woman, uneducated in a village, thought, oh, that sounds interesting. She actually got the funding she applied for it, got funding, built a passive solar greenhouse with Canadian funding assistance, and is now growing tomatoes in February up north. And she's growing seedlings for local farmers so they can plant their seeds early in the season because the seeds will already have progressed to a certain degree. Her family's benefiting financially, the community is better off. And this is just an uneducated woman who is so smart to take advantage of an opportunity, and she's rising the whole boatload of community with her. So there are examples like this all over Pakistan. Yeah. And so it's been a real journey on the women's side.
So any example that you've had a personal impact with, something that you just walked in with and was like,
well, our first ambassador for a day. So in 2023. Wherever I've been, we've had a program called Ambassador for a Day, but this had never existed in Pakistan. So we worked to have the first ever Ambassador for a Day to do with International Women's Day. And we chose a girl, 18-year-old girl from Chitral, and we brought her down to Islamabad, and we had a full day of great programming, including a food fusion event at the Serena. I had a Canadian chef in town, so we worked with the Serena to develop things like nihari poutine, like fusion dishes, like not jalebi, but what's
gulab jamun.
Yeah, but in maple syrup, kind of things like that. So we developed, and she was, we met with women-led UN agencies, and at the end of it, we approached the UN women, and we said, can you help us with leadership training? That girl ended up getting 4 months of leadership training up in Gilgit, and they paid everything. They paid her to move, and then they hired her. So we've had a direct impact on this girl from a small community up in Chitral. That's one, and we've done it ever since. We just had another iteration this year. We're trying to we're focusing on different provinces every year. So we did Punjab this year, Sindh last year, and the year before was Chitral. And we'll keep rotating. Amazing.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we know that Canada is playing a very active role in at least with, I'm also aware about forced marriages, right? What specific successes have you seen in Pakistan from the creating space to take action on violence against women and girls? Is this a segment that will continue here?
I have not been involved in any segment of dealing with violence against women. These would be, we often fund implementing agencies or requesters for programming like that, but we may not be involved directly as Canada other than funding. And a lot of our funding, like if you traveled around the country 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe, you'd see signage that says the Canadian International Development Agency. That doesn't exist anymore. Not only does the agency not exist, but we tend to give our money now through World Food Programme, UNDP, UNHCR. Like we go through the big donors, the money is pooled, and then the request may come from a local organizer, a local implementer, which means we might be further back from some of the priorities that we might have around the world globally, but we wouldn't, as an embassy, as a high commission, we might not be directly involved in Pakistan.
And sorry to cut you off, but you find that to be a more effective strategy here?
Absolutely, because it gives a larger fund amount to the recipient. And there's also a better ability to monitor the outcomes and to make sure that they're delivering what they say they will deliver. And there are some places we can't get to for security reasons where we can have local entity. Yeah, they can go and actually speak to the organizers and make sure, because we want to make sure we're still funding in places we can't physically get to, but we know there's a need. And so that might be, for example, in polio eradication. So we were the first sovereign donor to the polio eradication program in Pakistan, working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I traveled with them. We went to Peshawar, Lahore. I couldn't get to the border area and some of the tribal areas where the families, the fathers mostly, don't want the girls inoculated. But we support that fully. We're still funding it. We're very involved in it. But we as Canadian diplomats can't actually go and do it. So it does mean that having implementing partners makes it all possible, that we just can't do it ourselves. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like quite a challenge, though.
Well, there are some challenging areas. But what's interesting to me is, for example, you go to Altit and you've got 95% literacy. You go 18 kilometers away, let's say, and maybe you go down to 20% literacy and a very conservative frame.
Right.
But even in that environment, you might find a father or an uncle, and they want their girls to succeed.
Yeah.
And so they push back against their own community, and it's not easy. So it's men supporting girls, it's community supporting girls, and there are many ways that happens, and it's not just us that goes and does that. There are lots of people who don't believe in forced marriage,
absolutely,
or forced conversion, or you name it. And so we're part of a conversation, and we are here, like through the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, we're looking for local initiatives, where the local community has said, this is what we need, and this is what we think it would take to get there. Can you help us with that?
Right.
And we're like, absolutely, and we would fund. And it's always, we have a feminist international foreign policy. We have a feminist international humanitarian policy. So all the money we give anybody, there has to be a GBA, like a gender benefit analysis.
Right.
You have to actually show how it's going to benefit women and girls in your community. That doesn't mean we don't want to benefit the community and men in the community.
Of course.
But the starting point is always, what does it mean for the women and the girls?
It sounds amazing. In fact, something that you have just spoken about, which is the CFLI. So digital inclusion is something that I know that the Canadian Mission has been working with regards to women and children. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Digital inclusion is very interesting. We do support a lot of digital literacy and helping women use to do online businesses and that kind of thing. Or fighting back against misinformation. Like we support programs that might develop films that would be shown in schools that will show young people how to push back against misinformation, disinformation. So we do a lot of work in that space. But some of the challenge there's a lot of focus on online businesses, for example. But if you're in a little village up north somewhere, and you can find the best apricot shampoo on the planet up there.
Right.
It's like you're wearing an apricot. It smells great, it's great quality shampoo. But try getting that from your village down to the city where it can be shipped somewhere. There's no supply chain. So I think there's a challenge that still has to be met in terms of encouraging online businesses
to expand.
So that you figure out what's the next step, because not everybody can work online for Amazon. Some people actually have products they want to sell.
Yeah.
So that to me is the next step. And when we meet people who are bringing products down from the north, I'm always saying, have you considered reaching out to the women in your community who are making these amazing products? And there are lots of different products being made by women. But when we were up north, my daughter and I bought so much apricot shampoo, it was ridiculous because it was like the best. And we brought it down with us. But I was thinking they've got to find a way to get it to market. Yeah. So digital inclusion is you want girls and women to have a voice, and you want people fighting against injustice to have a voice. So yes, we do want to support that, but there's some challenging areas in the country that are not easy to talk about on the public.
Of course. So something that you'd mentioned again, and I'd like to sort of get a little bit more input on that, is the Banff Mountain Film Festival. So that's another. It's a space that's being created where Canadian culture is being brought to Pakistan, right? So I'm wondering, how do you think that benefits the community, that cultural exchange? What is it that comes out of that? How does it strengthen our ties and address challenges that are relatable on both sides? Climate change, digital inclusion, so on and so forth.
Well, we initially started bringing the films from the festival in association with our winter programming on empowerment through ice hockey. But the messages of environmental sustainability and of women in leadership roles and women in adventure and anybody in adventure and just doing sport, like a lot of what we discovered up north was that a lot of people actually weren't going outside in the winter. And you know, a generation ago, women weren't allowed to go outside in some of these communities up north. But we wanted to encourage fun outside. And climate change, you know, where there used to be ice, for example, in, if you went to Buni in Chitral, now the ice doesn't last very long when there is ice. Sometimes there isn't ice, but when it is there, it can be very soft around the edges and it doesn't last very long. So communities are looking away from actual winter sport to things like mountain biking or other things. But by showing these adventure films and showing girls, like girls that are mountain biking in Utah or in the Moab or whatever, you're seeing girls and you're like, wow, girls do that, that's awesome. And I think as a woman, every time I do something that's visible, and this to me is part of, you know, of Ambassador for a Day, seeing women in leadership roles is huge.
Right.
Because if you can't see it, you can't be it, which sounds stupid, but it's true. If you've never seen a woman prime minister, you wouldn't think it's possible.
Yes,
so you need to have the visual, but it's also the adventure and getting outside and exploring life and the adrenaline rush and mountain sports, and it's gorgeous. Like you had a film this year about the Karakoram, and I mean, does it get more gorgeous than the mountains, you know, up north, and you've got all these incredible mountain ranges. So it's also talking about the beauty of our planet, you know, and why we have to take care of it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you know, we're all aware that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. How is Canada's funding for the Green Climate Fund and other initiatives translating into actionable support for Pakistan in terms of support for Pakistani women and girls facing climate-related challenges?
Well, that's an interesting question. We obviously, we're a big donor to the Green Climate Fund. Pakistan is a recipient of, there are 10 projects ongoing with the Green Climate Fund. Those are requested by Pakistan. And that's like, you know, climate resilient businesses, or, you know, if you're looking at things like, for example, if you go into near Sukkur and a year after the 2022 flooding, you'll see some of the warehouses that were built after the 2010 flooding. The food that was in these buildings actually got wet. So you might want to be building up resilient structures for like you're planning to have food available at intervals, so that should roads get washed out or should people be unable to get out of their local community, they can still have access to food when there's a crisis. So things like that, or helping people like solar panels. You're thinking, what can you do that's environmentally sustainable? For example, we do a lot of we support a lot of electrical generation through hydropower. And so a lot of small hydro plants that are installed up north come from Canadian funding, and it means the whole village now has 24/7 electricity. So that's a sustainable way of having electricity. Some of the challenges here, like just 2 hours east of Karachi, there's a very big wind corridor, and Canada has a big investment there, JCM Power. And it's completely renewable, clean energy. And given the pollution problems in Pakistan, you'd think that everybody would be going, oh my goodness, renewable, clean energy, that's the ticket, that's good for the country. But there are other things in the way. There are contracts with coal production, domestic and foreign. There are other things that get in the way of that. And these renewable power generators can't get all of their output onto the grid because the grid is consumed with some coal. It's cheaper to produce renewable clean energy through wind turbines, but contracts are in place.
Right.
So what will this country do to make more access available to clean renewable energy in the future? And I look at that and I think like Barrick Gold is invested in Baluchistan, Rikodik. They're using solar and wind power. They're rebuilding the grid. They're very much they're following Canadian mining standards, and they are a good corporate citizen in terms of building schools. They're training their people to work. They want the local Baluchis to work there. They're building schools for children. They're doing all these good things. It's all part of a whole world view, I think, of the Canadian values that relate to climate. It's like, we're not going to tell you, Pakistan, what you need to do, but here's this money in the Green Climate Fund. Here's the frame. What would you like to do? What do you propose? And it's about climate resiliency. It's about rebuilding in a sustainable way. A lot of rebuilding wasn't done sustainably. Like after the 2010 floods, if you go to near Sukkur, let's say, after 2010, the roads washed away. So the engineers after that flood very cleverly and intelligently said, let's build the lattice work of roads, let's raise them up, which was great. Except, unfortunately, they didn't put culverts in.
Right.
So the water had nowhere to go. It was like a lattice work of puddles.
Right.
So a year later, the water is still sitting there. So next time you'll say, well, that didn't work. We have to put culverts in. So we're all learning as we go. So that would be a good example of a project where, having responded in a perfectly reasonable way the first time, now you say, okay, you got to fine tune that. You've got to make some adjustments so that next time the water can flow off, and have regulations. Like Pakistan has an excellent system of law, but there's a lot of enforcement missing. So where there are maybe not adequate supports to the law in terms of climate and rebuilding, maybe enforce the law and make sure that somebody isn't able to divert, for example, away from their land and their fields. Like, but that's for the local, that's for Pakistanis to worry about and to advocate for. But there's a lot of things that can be done, I think, and if there is funding available, it could be technical expertise. It could be what is a sustainable way to rebuild. But if you're allowing people to build right along a river and they're breaking building code and no one's doing anything, next time the river washes it out, whose fault is that?
Right.
And you're going to lose lives again, and you're going to lose property. I mean, it's in the Kailash, you know, seeing the damage from flooding, seeing it in Sindh, seeing it in Punjab, like it was so catastrophic.
Right.
So, sorry, a long-winded answer, sorry.
No, absolutely. I'm glad that you answered it so thoroughly. And yes, the floods have been, in fact, quite heartbreaking for a lot. There's lots of people that have been displaced. So we know that climate change is circular, right? So it's also a lot of the impact of climate change is coming from some of the more developing countries that, you know, affect third world countries. And so a part of what I guess our audience would be very curious to hear is, what is it that Canada is perhaps doing on its end to ensure that impact of climate change, whether it is in Canada or across the world, is mitigated?
Canada has really contributed a lot to green climate financing, and we do believe that that's an important thing to do. But I guess I would say back to you that I think the government of Pakistan has to make investment decisions that are good for Pakistan and good for Pakistan's vulnerabilities. For example, if you're living up north and you don't have any fuel to burn in the winter and you're cold and you start taking all the trees off the side of a mountain, that mountain is going to landslide and you're going to shut the road down. And that's happening. So the government of Pakistan needs to mitigate that. And I guess when I look at what Pakistan is doing, I think to myself, there needs to be a lot of thought given to the mitigation measures being taken domestically. There is a lot of climate finance available, but there has to be concrete projects to mitigate against risk. And if you have people who need fuel, you've got to figure out how to get them fuel so they're not tearing the trees off the side of the mountain and you're having mountains slide down.
Right.
So, and on the example in Sindh, a lot of that water was toxic from farming chemicals, so that land is not usable. But we have been a major contributor to the Green Climate Fund, and we work on carbon credit. We're doing a lot of work. We're partnering with Pakistan on carbon credits, and for us, that is a very important approach to be taking. And there are a lot of amazing private sector companies and initiatives in Pakistan on carbon trading. So those are areas that we would support. But I think the climate financing is an area that Canada is particularly strong.
Okay. So the world recently celebrated International Development Week, right? What are some of the Canadian development priorities in Pakistan?
I was just thinking I think I've said most of them already, but education and health, obviously, engaging in political, so making sure that people have a voice politically. We have partnering in times of crisis. So after the 2022 flooding, Canada was very quick to, in total, after the Geneva Convention in January of the following year, we went up to about $58 million contribution, so we're very keen on there as well. But on flood relief and recovery, those would be the big priorities here in the development sector. I think that probably covers it. Women's empowerment is the overlay to everything, as I said earlier.
Right.
But those would be our biggies.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we celebrate 75 years of Canada and Pakistan's diplomacy, what specific areas of cooperation do you see as having the most potential for growth in the coming decade?
I think that I'm going to make a trade example. So we used
Yes,
to have,
please.
yes, we used to have a much higher bilateral trade, but in 2022, at the end of the year, overnight, the government imposed a complete block on GMO canola. And Canada and the United States were both major exporters to Pakistan. But more importantly, there was no lead time. So the Pakistani importers lost all their money. They paid for it. So it's been greenlit, but we've got to get it going because that is not only an important input into poultry feed, it's also a source of oil, but you can also export the meal, and so it's a very good economic driver getting back in that canola. Chicken is more expensive today because of that decision, because now there's not enough canola oil seeds coming into Pakistan to keep the price low. So decisions like that. So for Canada, that's a huge export imbalance issue. We have 4,000 Pakistani students on an average year going to Canada for post-secondary. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. We have about 300,000 Pakistani Canadians, but that's only the official numbers. There are many more than that. And I have to say, the Pakistani Canadians who are in politics are very engaged. And they're very engaged with Pakistan. So they have lots of views. So everybody has my number. Like they're very interested in what's happening in this country. And, and so that's, I mean, anybody being involved in politics is fantastic. So, but that to me is very striking.
Right, no, absolutely. So is there something what Canada does in particular to enhance these ties with the diaspora that it has in Canada of Pakistani origin?
I wouldn't say so in Canada. Canada is we call ourselves a melting pot, and we're a country founded by immigration, and so we don't look at one community versus another community. And I get asked sometimes, how are Pakistani Canadians doing? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know what someone's religion is. I don't know what their ethnic background is. I don't know where they come from. I mean, I can guess by looking at somebody where they might come from, but here it's much more prevalent to identify yourself by your religion or by your home, but we're just not built that way. And I think, so I would say no there. Here, there is just an emerging group where we're looking to bring together alumni of Canadian universities. I meet Canadian Pakistanis or Pakistanis living here, and they might be living here for years with Canadian citizenship. And they're all over the place. So there's this incredible reality of Canada being all over the place. And that's already there. And so we don't actually work on that actively, but under the Indo-Pacific strategy, which was launched in 2023, people-to-people ties is part of that. So we want to have university exchanges and all those usual things you see in public diplomacy. But I wouldn't say I make a special effort, because people already do it because they have those ties to Canada. They've got family in Canada, they've got friends in Canada, they studied in Canada. It's very present everywhere I go. Like pretty much everybody, with very few exceptions that I've met, has somebody in Canada. And it's a constant.
In that way, we are actually very closely tied.
Very much, yeah.
So university exchanges, as you just mentioned. Pakistan has been exporting skilled labor for a very long time. Is there perhaps an initiative that Canada has or will work on perhaps in the future where there is maybe a set of requirements shared with universities here that says, if these are the qualities that are matched with this university, we'd be happy to bring them on board? Because there is an exchange that takes place, so I'm wondering if there are any initiatives to back that up.
The Government of Canada doesn't get involved so much in that. Universities have university-to-university exchanges and partnerships, but we don't get involved in that. We do support the Dawn Education Marketing Initiative, where they, once or twice a year, they bring in universities from all over the world, and there's usually a very good representation of very top Canadian universities. Some of the representation is the local Pakistani agent, and some of the representation comes from Canada. But we do come to recruit in Pakistan. Obviously, our objective is to bring Pakistanis to Canada to study and to learn, but to come back to Pakistan and contribute to society here. Not 100%. Obviously, it's a value to us if we bring educated people and they come and stay in Canada, but it's a real benefit. You don't want to drain brain anybody. You want to give a good education where you can and partner where you can. But a lot of that at university stuff is just happening between universities, and we're not involved in it. So,
okay, all right. So immigration. So given that Pakistan offers Canadians free visas within 24 hours, to facilitate ease of travel,
I can tell you that they don't, because I know too many. It takes a long time sometimes to get a visa.
All right. So is there an initiative, with the current policies that Canada has, how will they affect Pakistanis seeking employment or educational opportunities in Canada?
Well, any Pakistani is welcome to apply for jobs in Canada and to apply for a visa to go to Canada. We have added visa processing capacity in Islamabad through the Indo-Pacific strategy, but we have our wait times are always posted. There was a really big drop in wait times after the war in Ukraine and COVID. And I was ambassador in Poland when the war broke out, and we turned into a 24/7 response entity for the refugees coming out of Ukraine. And there's no doubt that slowed down our capacity. And added to that was the refugees coming out of Afghanistan, which really ate up capacity here and in Abu Dhabi. So, but it varies depending on what the pressures are. But we have student programs, for example. We want students to go and get a visa in time to go to school. But a lot of people apply in the very last minute and they don't get the visa. But that's unfortunate. But I mean, I'm asked, like I said earlier to you when we were speaking, I'm asked every day about help for visas. But I have no authority on visas because it's very much it's a hard wall between immigration and global affairs Canada. Yeah, right. But it's generally an efficient system if people apply within the wait times that are posted and they apply with everything that's asked for. But often the mistakes, believe it or not, are simple. People hire an immigration specialist to help them with the form and they make a mistake and then it gets rejected.
Right.
So that happens, you can't believe how often. And you're just kind of like, this is a simple mistake, just resubmit it and fix the mistake. So sometimes delays are due to that. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So access to student exchanges and scholarships. What efforts are being made to sort of increase opportunities for Pakistani students and professionals to access these programs?
At the government level, we're not doing anything. That's a private university. Not private. Universities are not private in Canada. That's a university initiative. Like scholarships are offered by universities, not by the government of Canada or the province of Ontario or any other province. And I really regret that we don't have programs like that other countries have. We don't have particular scholarship programs like the Fulbright. We don't have anything like that. And I think that's such a shame, but we don't. Yeah.
Is that something that's on the cards perhaps?
No, we used to have programming, more university relations programming, but they were cut. When I was in Paris on posting in the maybe maybe 2010 or so, the education marketing was those kinds of scholarship things were cut. It's an unfortunate thing we don't offer.
Okay.
Honestly, I think that's a real shame. Yeah.
Your Excellency, Canada has recently resumed the role of a G7 presidency. What does that mean for Canada?
It's a bit of a continuation of the priorities of the G7. It's about education. It's about ensuring that women have access. It's ensuring that people have access to dealing with emerging technologies. It's about climate. It's about the usual priorities of the G7. Canada is, our focus on women and women empowerment will continue, and it does overlay our leadership of G7, but those same priorities will continue as we lead through this presidency.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. So, just going into a couple of other areas.
Yeah.
I've been following the 75 Pakistan Experiences series on Instagram. It's been a lot of fun to follow, and I would definitely recommend our audiences follow it too. It's especially those abroad. What experience has been the most, unique, shocking, different for you so far? And is there something that you're still eager to try before completing all 75?
I was thinking about that. We've done so many things, and it's been fantastic. We've been to museums. I've been up to the top of the really tall scaffolding on the, renovating the old city in Lahore. I've been up as high, way up top, and you're looking at the mosaics, and the experts are saying, well, that lion is there because that was when China was this or whatever, and you're hearing the history of the mosaics, and the access we've had through these 75 videos have been fantastic. And we've got some beautiful videos up north. I have regrets about not being able to go to SWAT, for example. I would just love to go to SWAT. There are places I won't get to for security reasons, but the engagement we've had with food, eating great food or eating food that I've never had before, like shopshiro up in
Yes.
up north, and it's yak
Chitra,
meat in Parata, and it was like amazingly good. And so we're filming this, and it's like, wow, I'm eating yak meat, you know, like things that you never thought you'd experience, you know, or skating up in Chitral, or, you know, we've hiked up to mosques, like up in Khaplu, hiking up to the mosque, or visiting like Rotas Fort, or it's just this cultural journey we've been on has been amazing. And in Lahore, I mean, obviously, it's so culturally rich with history. The food is great. You know, I guess I think the museums have been pretty great. I don't know. There's so many things we've done. So many things. So much of it's got to do with food for some reason. I don't know why.
Pakistanis love their food.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right.
And absolutely, you know, we do have very different cultures across the country, actually.
Oh, the diversity here.
Yes.
When I presented my credentials to the president, it was Dr. Alvi at the time, my son was with me, and he was wearing shalwar kameez. He looked gorgeous. He just arrived from Toronto, like 20 minutes before we drove over to the president's office, and he was exhausted, but he agreed to come, and I want my son to see me as a woman having this ceremony. You go in a horse-drawn landau, like it's incredible, right? Great, beautiful, formal ceremony. And my son he had a stupid mustache, but the sun made it look reddish.
Right.
And people were saying he looked like he was from Chitral. And everywhere I go, like I was struck the first time I went to Sindh and saw this Sindhi woman, beautiful, fine features. Her head was covered, and she was farming. And I thought, everywhere I go, the food is different, the dance is different, the music is different, the personality is different. Everything's different.
Yeah.
The literature's different, the culture's different.
The language, the clothing,
everything, exactly. Yeah. Like coming to lecture here at ECJ, the women might have been at U of T. It was like, or you go to villages where it's so conservative, or you meet like the 17-year-old girl we brought up from a little village in Sindh to talk about sexual reproductive health, because she'd had training on limiting the number of children. And she said to me in Sindhi, and it was translated, she said, "A year ago, I couldn't even have looked at you, let alone talk to you. But now I have confidence because of the training I got." And I thought, this is a gift to me to talk to her, because I would never get a chance to talk to someone like her from this remote community in Sindh. So that's the journey we've been on, and it's been fabulous. And that I think I will leave Pakistan, when I leave Pakistan, with a feeling of the intense diversity and the joy I've seen here. It's been such a great adventure, as I've said before, but that to me is what the most striking thing, I think.
That's very heartwarming to hear, actually.
Well, now Karachi has a personality.
Yes.
Lahore has a different personality.
Absolutely.
Islamabad, sleepy capital city. Not that exciting. Always nice to get out of Islamabad.
Come visit more often. So I hear that you're an avid canoeist and hiker. Have you tried any adventure sports in Pakistan?
Well, I've done a little bit of
from
hiking.
hockey up north.
Yeah, I've done some hiking, but I found it really difficult having the security around me. So no, what I've tended to do, like I've done trekking in Nepal and hiking in Turkey, and I've tended to use this as my base, because I can't, like my daughter and I were cycling around Islamabad in the morning. I shouldn't say this, but you know, Islamabad is a planned city. It's got great shoulders, it's a great cycling city. But security's like, you're what?
Yeah.
You know, they heard, and they were like, whoa, wait a minute, you can't do that. Yeah. And if you do insist on doing it, you have to have an armored vehicle following you. And I'm an environmentalist, and I just said, I can't justify for my own edification. So I started biking around the inside of the diplomatic enclave, and then I did that like once. And it reminded me, you know the expression, mad dogs in Englishmen? It was like 32 degrees, my water bottle was hot. Yeah. And I thought, why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? So I think that the limitations of the security situation vis-a-vis my experience, just because of the title I carry. It's not true for all Canadian diplomats, but the title I carry comes with it some challenges for freedom of movement. But I mountain biked from Murree, 40 kilometers from Murree into Islamabad. We mountain biked along the Ridge Road. I've done a lot
that is not for the faint-hearted.
No, and in places the boulders are so big you're carrying your bike. Like it's not actually a bikeable trail. But
absolutely.
It was fun.
Right.
Yeah. So I've done hiking and that kind of, but not. I haven't done treks to K2 base camp or anything. I just it would be, I'd have such a big crew with me. I just can't justify it.
Do you see yourself coming back after? At some point?
Well, you know what I'd like to do is go places I can't go now because of my title. That's what I'd like to do. And when I met Malala, which was like delightful, and I just thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to go to SWAT? Because that's where I first read about SWAT, was her book.
Right.
And meeting her father, and I thought, he must be one guy in a million to have been such a proponent of girls' education, you know? So yeah, there are places I'd like to come back and see.
No, absolutely, and I'm sure that we'd love to have you. What is one experience that you've had in Pakistan that you're likely to recommend to your friends and family back home?
I think Lahore at night, having dinner, looking over the old city.
Ah, yes.
Does it get more romantic? I don't think so. That was pretty great. But I think some of the museums that I've seen have been pretty amazing. Although, you know, there's so many. I think visiting the forts, like Kodiji Fort, or I think learning about the incredibly long and diverse history of Pakistan, like the different periods, the Delhi period, the Mughal period, like looking through even simple places like the Mahatma Palace Museum. That house, gorgeous.
Yes.
But the history of it, there are two religions involved in the builder, and then now it's a beautiful art gallery, or like it's a cultural center. So photography exhibit I saw there was very well curated, a beautiful, beautiful show. But the museums, like is it the Pakistan Museum? Is it in Lahore, the Pakistan Museum? What's it called? The History Museum?
Right.
It's amazing. It's the museumology, if that's a term, is top notch. Doesn't get better. So the museums have been fantastic. But that's what I think I would recommend. Lahore is very permissible. It's you can go anywhere, it's safe.
Right.
And so I think Lahore, as a tourist, is great because you can move freely. The Lahore Museum is very interesting. Like there are lots of good museums. Taxila is great.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everywhere. Here's me going, oh, and then there's that, and there's that, and there's that. Yeah. Not very helpful, not very specific.
No, that's fine. Lots of different recommendations. All right. You've studied cooking in Japan and in Italy.
I have. Wow, you've done your research.
If we were to come to your house for dinner, what would be on the menu?
Well, that's a bad question. I haven't cooked in quite a while now because I've been cooked for. What do I like to make? I eat very healthy food. I make my own muffins. So every morning I have my own muffin. And I eat a lot. I make bread. What would I make for dinner? I might make sushi. I might make a curry. I like a curry. We grew up eating Indian food. I didn't know Pakistani food till I came here. And it's very similar. Yeah. I like a very spicy dish. And so I've really enjoyed the spiciness of some of the more spicy dishes I've had. So we did do cooking classes with the chef at the residence, and I have learned to make a few things there. But if I were cooking, it would probably be fairly simple because I've actually gotten out of the habit of cooking, I have to say. Yeah.
All right, and what Pakistani dish are you likely to serve?
What would I serve?
A favorite that you have.
I was thinking, I do like nahari, and it's very makeable. And it's very specific to you. You make your own nahari, and it's personality.
Yeah.
I might make that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. It also covers a lot of palates.
Yeah, it does.
Across
like a lot
Pakistan.
of dishes are so different. Like when I was tweeting about Pakistani food when I first got here, and I was tweeting every week about every new dish I was having because I was eating a different meal, and people would tweet to me and tell me, oh, you got to try this, or try that, but with this topping or whatever. And the day that I tweeted about biryani, I got so much feedback because everybody said, you can't have biryani in Islamabad, you have to go to Karachi.
Yeah.
And so having things that are very specific to a region or a city, you get it when you get there.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah.
Yes, all right. If you had one piece of advice that you could give young professionals going into diplomacy, what would it be?
A professional going into diplomacy. Well, I would say think about what your objective in going into diplomacy is, because you are led by the government of the day. And if you're in diplomacy, it doesn't matter what your personal opinion is. You're there to represent the interests of your elected government. So I'm finding myself surprised to be saying that. I wouldn't have thought I'd go down that road. It's been a fantastic career. But I would say if you're a professional and you've already had a career or you're working, you give up a bit of independence if you find yourself in a situation where there's been an election,
right,
and there's a new government, and you may not agree with the policies that you're having to promote. That's what I would say.
That is great advice, because I don't think people take that into account when
Yeah, because
getting
it's a
into-
privilege to represent your country abroad.
Absolutely.
And I think if you're looking at it from the outside, you'd say all glamour, all excitement, all new experiences, you know, everything from culture to trade exposure to what you name it. But at the end of the day, you have to deliver what the government of Canada is asking you to deliver.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Before we close, and given that, again, March 8th is right around the corner, do you have a quote or an experience that you would like to share with Pakistani women?
well, as a matter of fact, I would say I was just at the Aga Khan University, and this type of message was reflected in the message of the Aga Khan in the early days of the foundation of the university. I would invite Pakistani women to look back to a lot of what Jinnah said and wrote about the importance of women in Pakistani society, and why secularism is important, because it doesn't matter what your religion is. Everybody has a role to play to contribute to their society, and we really believe that about, you know, support for religious minorities, because every diverse piece of your country brings good things to your country.
It absolutely
So I would
does.
say look back to your founder and things he said about the importance of the role of women in governing in all aspects of life, both private and personal. Women are equal partners in everything we do, and that would be my advice to Pakistani women, because they have a fabulous role model in Jinnah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an incredibly inspiring and insightful conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
High
you for your
Commissioner.
questions. I felt challenged, and I'm questioning my answers. Did I say the right thing?
I'm so glad. I'm so
Thank you.
glad that this was an enjoyable conversation.
Very much. Thank you.
And it was great. It was such a great pleasure getting to know the person behind the title.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Lovely.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more conversations with leaders shaping our world. Until next time, we'll see you later. Take care. This is Iram Sheikh signing out.